about somebody in the other section. They can feel good about what you say. Okay, so anybody come to mind? No? Are you being really shy? Or were they, in your opinion, were they all awful? Well, I know they were not. All right, well, I'm not going to do any shout outs because students have told me that they get embarrassed when I do that. So what I will do is ask you to continue to think about what are or who were the presenters that you were like, okay, that's a technique I can use, or that's a strategy I want to adopt, or whatever they did that was just like, oh, I didn't think about doing that. All right, so today what we're going to do is look at what's required for your next outline. Now remember, this outline is due on Sunday night, and it is for grade. So whatever you submit will be the grade you receive, although I will still give you feedback because you'll want to take the feedback and make edits for your actual speech before you deliver it to me. Remember, you need to call dibs on a day and time for when you want to do that speech with me. I will either do a Zoom or a collaborate with you, or if we have to do a telephone, we will. But make sure you sign up for that day and time so that it doesn't get away from you. All right, and so you've got a goal in mind. Also, call dibs on that Aesop fable if you haven't done it yet. Make sure that you do not wait until the last minute, and then when you go in there and you see what's been taken, you discover that the one you want has already gone. So you don't want to be in that kind of a situation. That's why I want to see your outlines early so that you're doing a lot of good preparation. Well, today we are going to start looking at more creative methods. So if you have your laptops or your phones, I encourage you to look into your resource book and pull up chapter 9. We are literally going to go through each of the sections on chapter 9 to give you a really, really good feel for how you can be far more creative, far more different than the usual kind of speech, and really match your strategies for the techniques that you use or the creativity that you add that meets the meaning, the message that you're trying to convey, right? So to start, I want to take a look at a quick reminder of our approach. And remember that you have a big chunk, you have a big section that is your introduction. So don't forget, that's going to have all that still the same information that you had in your last speech. Remember, your retelling of the Aesop fable is going to be a small amount of information. All right, so that box should be pretty small. That content's going to be smaller. And the bulk of your speech is really your personal narrative. So that's the majority of what you want to give your attention to. That's what you want your audience to really, really leave with a good feeling. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. And then here is a little bit, which is your conclusion. Now, you can see that these are relatively proportionate to the types of information you're going to have. And so if there's going to be this much time given to an introduction, then how are you going to make it unique and how are you going to make it special? And that's what we'll talk about today. We know in research that when people leave a speech or a talk, they will tend to remember the first thing you say and the last thing you say. The only way that they remember what's in the middle is if you are able to make the information so detailed, so vivid, so easy for them to connect with, that it causes an emotion or a feeling or even a thought process, etc. But this is the part where you sometimes will lose people if you don't develop it well. So we're going to focus here for right now. In chapter 9, on section 1, you'll see that it gives you, talks first about the audience attention, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. So I want you to jump down to where it says 1.2 is the purpose. So on your outline, remember, you still need to have your general purpose, your specific purpose, your thesis, your visual aids, which will be none again, and of course your reminders of what you want to be reminded to do based on the video that you did of your last speech of the things that you want to make sure that you're really good at, okay, or that you don't repeat problems. All right, I want you to take a look at 1.3, and you're going to see that this next part, actually, let's look at this. Inside here, it gives general comments about all the things that are like your checkbox of the things that you need to include. All right, so of course you're going to do your greet, and of course you're going to do your attention getter. I'm going to give you lots of ideas for that. You have to get your purpose of your speech in there, but you're going to be doing that through your thesis. So although you have your purpose, general purpose and specific up there, it's not really saying here. You don't say to an audience, the purpose of my talk is. We never do that. You need to make sure that you establish your credibility, all right? And there's a couple of ways that you do that. And this is the part where I wanted you to reflect on the video speeches that your classmates delivered. Because most of the time, the number one reason why one person's speech was deemed better than other speeches was because of the first item that's listed under 1.3. It says competence and credibility. Okay, so credibility comes competence. For effective speakers, we look at something called emotional intelligence. In communication studies specifically, we use the phrase of communication competence. So this is the ability, all right, a person is able. So it's the ability to say the right thing at the right time to the right people or audience, all right, to achieve the right goal. All right, that's a competent person. And a competent person is one who comes across as being highly competent, which means it just flows. The speech just, you know, you may glance at your notes, but you don't have to stand there and read them or overly look at them. It's a degree of poise with, in case there's a mistake, just, you know, pick it up, keep on going. It's the use of gestures, it's eye contact, it's facial expressions and all those things, but it just looks like the person has it all together. They're not worried. They're cool, calm, and collected. They know what they're going to say, they know how they're going to say it, and who they're going to say it to, etc. Right? So they are competent speakers. They have that ability. The next item down there under 1.3 talks about trustworthiness. I can't emphasize this enough. In today's election cycles, the ability to say truth, remember what Plato gave us, sometimes gets lost. In fact, there's fact checkers after certain people speak to find out what was a distortion of the truth and what was an outright lie. So hopefully, as a result of this class, you are going to be really good audience members and ferret out those lies, even those half-truths, to know where really, really real truth is, okay? So that means then that you need to come across as part of your credibility as being truthful, and that you have truthfulness, and that you are trustworthy, right? So you are worthy of the trust that your classmates are going to be giving you by listening to your speeches. The other element, all right, so all of this is you are worthy of trust, and that you also care about your audience, that you have goodwill intentions. So all of that's part of your credibility. All of that's done by when you walk in front of the camera or you walk on stage. All of that is accomplished by all of these elements, but a genuine, I mean a real desire to help or to teach or to persuade or to whatever it is your goal. All right. So that takes us down to another thing that you need to make sure that you're doing, as well as the credibility, is you've got to make sure that you have relevance. Your book refers to that as provide reasons to listen. Remember, I also said this is the WIFM, W-I-I-F-M. All of this has to happen up here. You have to reach out and connect with your audiences so that they know why they're listening to you, why they're giving you the gift of their time away from their video games or studying or talking with a friend or whatever, that it's worth it, that it's worth their time to invest in what you're going to say. Please, please don't forget your thesis statement and your preview. All right, you've got to tell your audience the 3 main points. In this instance, you only have 1 main point and 2nd main point, so you have 2 main points, and you're just going to put those. So you've got to say those, so don't forget. All right, and then that takes us into the transition and then move into all these elements. So if this is powerful, if this is impactful, then when you get down to here, all you need to do is a quick summary, a memorable thought, and a thank you. Your audience is then ready to leave, and to leave with that memorable thought is the last thing in their brain. And that has been what you said up here and reinforced all the way through. Right? So over on section 2, let's talk about methods for attention getters. Oh my goodness, these get exciting. All right. I'm going to go through the list and I'm going to tell you what not to do, as well as really good techniques. Some of these are so overused and so overdone, etc. All right, so the first item that we have here, if we look, is, I'm on the wrong page, let me get to it. Oh, all right. Remember competence. So whatever technique you use as your attention getter, remember it needs to be the right thing to say to the right audience at the right time. So a lot of this is going to depend on appropriateness. And that's where the emotional intelligence comes in. We know lots of very bright, intellectual IQ going off the charts, people who speak, and they just, oh my goodness. And you're wondering, what? Right. We want the people to have a good understanding of their surroundings, of the people, of the climate, of the culture, and to select words carefully or pointedly, etc. All right, so make sure that everything that you do is on point, but it is very audience-centered. You care about the audience, right? So over here at 2.1, one of the techniques is to refer to a subject, all right? So don't do this one. Everybody, you can kind of do a X off this technique. This is like saying the title of a speech. And by the way, we never put a title at the top of your outlines. Never. We don't give titles. We use interesting attention getters to try and get their attention. But to walk up to an audience and say, hi, my name is Kathy Kruska. Today I'm going to talk about a fable and my story. All right. Well, you did your preview. You basically just gave a title of the speech. Or you could say, today I'm going to talk about a fable and what happened to me over summer break. No. Don't do those. So get rid of number one, where you are just reading, so to speak, a title or a synopsis of what you're going to talk about. We don't do number 2.1. But 2.2 can be very good. 2.2 says refer to something about the audience. All right. So you could make an observation about how beautiful everybody looks with their masks. You might refer to, wow, look over there. We've got a lot of people who really are enjoying clever design masks. And over here we have our normal everyday masks. Or you could say something like, let's see, they give some example. As human resource professionals, you and I know, okay, like if you were sharing, so you could say like student to student. As community college students, you and I all know that this way of taking classes is not what we were expecting. Right? It's the attention getter. Right? That's just calling attention to what's going on that the audience can relate to, that they share with you. The next one, 2.3, is a quotation, and this one I strongly recommend. Remember, you need to have a minimum of one source in order to get a 3 points out of 4 points. You already know what that one source is, and it's going to be the fable. Well, my recommendation is that you add more sources. And one of the easiest ways to do that is with a quote. And you can do that at the very beginning. You can do that by saying again, hi, my name is Kathy Kruska. A wise man once said, to be or not to be. Right? And then you say, Shakespeare, the famous, then you give the source, etc. That's where you want to bring in something that could be a famous quote, and there's lots of them out there. One of my favorite quotes is Gandhi's quote, which is, be the change you want to see in others. All right, so you can think about something that's going to be impactful. And then if we look again, we've got the beginning of your outline and the conclusion of your outline. Whatever quote you use up here, you could have a similar quote as your memorable thought Sometimes you can even use the same quote again for your memorable thought so that the repetition is valuable. Now, if you look here, are you guys there in your thing? I want you to take a look at these. So there's hyperlinks there. There's the Bartlett's familiar quotations. There's quotations page, bartleby.com, etc. So movie quotes. So everybody right now, click on one of those hyperlinks and find a quote that you like, oh, that's a cool one. Everybody find a quote. Do it on your phone or your laptops. If you're watching the video from home, please do that as well. When you see a pretty good one, I want you to stand. I don't want you to be the last man sitting. All right. Ashley, it looks like you got one. Who's the person who said it?
Alfred Edward Houseman.
Okay, all right. So if you use a quote like that, look around the room. How many of you know who Houseman is? Raise your hand. All right. How many of you know who Gandhi is when I said it? Raise your hand. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. That's a perfect example. For a quote from a person who you know, people in the audience will not know who the person is, you have to give 2 or 3 qualifiers. So you'd have to say who Houseman is, all right? So be careful of the quotes that you select, that they are usually famous people. So if I was to do a quote by Abraham Lincoln, how many of you, raise your hand, would know that? Okay, 407 years ago, right? Exactly. So keep that in mind. If I say something, a quote by Lincoln, I don't have to qualify by giving credentials. I can just say, according to President Lincoln in 1847, no, would have been dead then, 1844, okay, is what you would have done. All right, great example. So, but there's lots of them here that you can pick from. And you can just say, you know, a quote I was reading the other day of a list of 100 great quotations said blah. All right, good. Quotations are excellent. I strongly recommend them. I also want to talk about quotations when you get to hold this one close as a really good strategy. When you get into your informative speech, which is next, and you get into your persuasive speech, your final speech, quoting important people who you know your audience respects can be extremely helpful. Right? to further your cause or to reach out and touch your audience, so to speak. Also be careful that you don't quote somebody who you know your audience is going to hate. So be careful of that too. All right. The next one, 2.4, says make a reference to current events. All right. Oh my gosh. There are so many current events going on in today's world right now. I mean, it could be the latest about a vaccine, the fires in California, COVID, the COVID parties at universities in the Greek houses, all kinds of stuff you could talk about. That's a current event, right? So you could refer to a current event and cite your source, or you can do it in generalities where people will know. And then 2.5 is similar, but you're going to reach back into history and pull it out of a current event from history and relate it to today. So if you were to talk, for instance, an informative speech about the sit-ins, so to speak, or the demonstrations in Portland, Oregon right now, you might say, you might go back into referring to the 1960s and the sit-ins and protests against the war, the Vietnam War. And so you might want to draw some parallels to that, or sit-ins and protests to the women's movement. You know, women mattered in the 1960s and 70s. Which was a rallying cry for the Equal Rights Amendment, similar to what we're trying to do for Black Lives Matter and having something to fix this police brutality and police issues. So reaching back into history can be really good too, especially if you can do it with a particular event. So if you wanted to talk about what was happening in downtown Portland, you could compare it to what happened in downtown Santa Barbara with the burning of a Bank of America building. Okay. Next, 2.6 is another good technique. It's called the anecdote. Now, be careful. In your outline, you have an anecdote that's built into the design of this speech, and that's called your actual fable. That's an anecdote. That's taking a story and retelling it in your own words for your audience to hear. You can also use a shortened version of that as an introduction, right? Of a tiny, like one sentence type of little short story to tell in an intro. If you were not using the Aesop fable, if you were doing a completely different speech and you wanted to use something like the fable, let's say you were talking about the importance of climate change. Well, there's an Aesop fable that talks about protecting the earth. And so if your informative speech was to inform your audience about the truth of climate change, then you could start it off with a short little Aesop fable to start it off with your introduction. Some people like to use stories from other types of literature. The Bible can be good. Something from the Quran can also be very, very good. Other kind of sacred scripture, and there's many different kinds of sacred scripture, something from the Torah or the Talmud. Lots of things that you could use. All right. Have I gotten any that you're like saying, oh yeah, I'm going to use that one. Oh yeah, that's really cool, Miss Kay. Have I hit on any that you like? Yeah? No? Maybe? All right. Well, 2.7 is what I did for the example of the startling piece of data, the startling statement. Remember when I was talking about the example of 8 out of every 20 students that graduate from high school are going to graduate with an STD? Well, That's what this means, the startling statement or a startling statistic. Just make sure that you give the source. Where did it come from? Who said it? And the date. 2.8 is awful. Don't use this. Any questions? Basically, it's two types of questions that you ask. So you would start off by saying, hi, my name is Kathy Kruska. By a show of hands, who here has parents who graduated from a four-year university? Raise your hand. Okay. Don't do that. Don't do that technique. No, 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 no. Don't do that one. The other question is the rhetorical question, where you don't expect any response. Unfortunately, sometimes people think you do, and so they will give you a verbal response, and that's awful. Another reason why we don't like to do these. So, it might be a contemplative type of question. Have you ever wondered about why the sky is blue? Don't do those. 2.9 is the use of humor. How many of you are good at telling jokes? Raise your hand. We have any good joke tellers? You're honest, huh? I'm the world's worst. I always mess up the punchline. Is that what you all do too? Yeah. I mean, it's hard to have that timing right and to say the words just perfect on a punchline. So you may use humor if it's emotionally intelligent for that audience, if the joke is appropriate and will not be offensive, if the joke has some connection or meaning versus just some random joke you happen to hear, and if you're good at it. But if you're not good at it, don't touch that one. And especially, like I said, it's got to be appropriate because a joke can easily offend. Unfortunately, jokes tend to be targeted at a protected group. And so you want to be careful not to do that. 2.10 is good. It talks about what's known as a personal reference. And that's just where you talk about something that you personally accomplished or that you completed or that you did. And if the speech is a testimonial where you are, giving a rah-rah motivational, you climbed Mount Everest and you're here to tell everybody how you had the courage to do that, then you can refer to, in 1983, I climbed Mount Everest and was the first woman to put a flag at the top. Right? You could do something like that. That was certainly not. You can also do a reference to the occasion itself, and many of you did that one as part of your special occasion speech, where you were referring to the happy couple or to the person who was being honored. And it's not terribly clever unless you make it sometimes a little fun or kind of thing, but you can do that. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about that I had up here is relevance. And I said it refers to WIFM, what's in it for me. It's the answer to your audience's question, why should I listen to you? Be very good on the relevance. Be very clear. Don't confuse relevance with credibility. They're not the same. Don't confuse relevance with your transition statement. They're not the same. All right. So keep all of these items with their elements, actually, their labels there, separate and distinct. right? Because I'm going to be grading hard on those to make sure that you know what you're talking about when you're coming through on those. Okay, the rest of this is really pretty self-explanatory. Everybody is pretty good at writing your thesis statements. We're not going to talk about how to organize just yet. We're using a topical approach. Well, let me just explain. We're going to talk about a myth first, and then we're going to talk about a real experience. All right? That's a topic, a myth and reality. That's just a topical. There's other ways that you can organize your speeches, and we'll look at some of those, especially for your next speech. So you may want to do in time. All right, so it would be 2000, 2015, 2020. So that would be a time, a chronology of how you would order your element. So you should do it like this. Oops. All right, that's time. Another way that you can do it is by geography. And so you may want to talk about something where you start here in good old Southern Pines, and you want to talk about your trip that you took to the West Coast, in which case then main point one might be how you started, and then your first stop may have been Oklahoma, and then your next stop might have been Las Vegas, because everybody has to stop in Las Vegas, and then your final destination was San Francisco. All right, so that would be a geography. You can also do, and I know you know what this kind is a problem solution, which is just that. You're going to first begin the problem, and then you're going to bring the solution. Or it might be a cause and effect, all right, which means you're going to do the causes and the effects. On this one, the conclusion is going to be extremely important, all right? So these are techniques for how you can organize. One of the things that as you are preparing your next speeches is always be thinking about narrowing your topic and being as specific as you can. Now, everybody scroll down in your resource book to page one, to table 9.1. This is a great checklist that you can mentally go through on your outline before you submit it to me. And these are things like either yes or no. So looking at the thesis statement, because remember the thesis is the core. It's directly related to your general purpose and specific purpose. Your thesis statement is what everything in your speech is about. It is really hitting in on your research that you're going to be utilizing, etc. So the thesis, the meat or the heart of your speech. So check to make sure that it is, that it reflects, what you're trying to achieve, which is to teach. Can it cover the topic within the time that you have? Remember, it's 3 to 3.5 minutes. Is it simple? Keep it simple, sweetie. That's what we mean by KISS. Don't have it 2 sentences. It should be 1 sentence, but it should be a short sentence. It's what I like to say is reveal the topic. That's what you're doing. You're revealing your thesis. Will it get your audience's interest, etc. And we'll talk about persuasive later. Don't forget to preview your main points. And if you look over at table 9.2, there is an example of how these attention getters, your link to your topic, reasons to listen, yeah, all these things are there. So, okay. And there are some speech examples for you. So, I want you to scroll down to the end of the chapter, and I want you to look that there is actually an introduction worksheet to help you figure out how to do your outline. So don't follow this numbering because this is not correct numbering, but it is easy for you to see all of the elements like a checklist to make sure that you have those elements in there. All right. That's what I have today for you. Of course, the conclusion is a summary of what this is about with a memorable statement, and then thank you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let you leave early. However, if you have a question, I need you to come up to the camera and ask it. Use this chance to actually talk to me. So, because remember, this speech is coming up. So remember, you need to, or you can do it right now. Call dibs on the myth that you want to use so nobody uses it. And also sign up, let me know what days and times you're going to be available to deliver this speech. And both of those are places to do in Moodle. All right, I'm here. I'm going to turn off the video camera, but I'm here to answer your questions.